hopefully we can get this going. I want to thank everybody for attending our Black Forest Monthly Recovery Meeting. I am Commissioner Darryl. I've been heading up the recovery effort for the Black Forest fire. And I just wanted to go over this meeting is a little bit different than our normal meetings. The purpose of this meeting, I'm sure a lot of people have been paying attention to the news, and we have been in discussions with regard to our hazardous trees and what we're going to do about that. And I wanted to have the majority of the meeting devoted to allowing the county to present their proposal, which we are scheduled to vote on December 31st. I have not made up my mind one way or the other, but we wanted to make sure that we provided you with an opportunity to hear firsthand what the proposal is for the removal of hazardous tree. And during the presentation, we are going to allow, questions and answers. This is your opportunity to do that. We will probably take all the way up until 10 after 7 if we need to go ahead and ask those questions, because this is the last public meeting that we're going to have prior to it being scheduled for the formal agenda item on December 31st. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and kick it over to our county staff to make this presentation. I'll allow you to, if you want to answer questions during it or whatever, I'll leave that up to you, but I'm going to move so I can watch the presentation. And please don't be shy tonight. You never are, but we want to make sure that if you have some questions, please ask them. If we don't have the answer tonight, we want to make sure that we get that action item so we can address those prior to the December 31st hearing.
Hi everybody, good evening. My name is Jennifer Irvin and I'm with the County Public Services Department. I'm the Engineering Services Manager, and as Commissioner Glenn today indicated, we are going to go over the Black Forest Wildfire Hazard Tree Mitigation Proposal. And just want to let you know, we've been working over the past few months with several entities and internal organizations within the county to put this project together. Our county attorney's office, our procurement and contracts office, the U.S. Forest Service, FEMA, and then also in coordination with, we've been coordinating a lot with Mountain View Electric. This project and the purpose is to mitigate threats to life, public health, and safety. These are our chief priorities in El Paso County, is the safety of the citizens. Hazard trees, roots, trunks, and branches weakened by the fire can easily topple, and they pose a safety risk to all of the citizens. As you know, the wildfire produced many hazard trees within the right-of-way, but also within county parks and on private property adjacent to county-maintained right-of-ways. So tonight I'm going to go over the hazard tree removal criteria, a general project description of what we're proposing to do, some of the public process and information, and then finally a question and answer. What are hazard trees? They are dead or dying trees that are considered a safety hazard. And how will we determine what is a hazard tree? The county and others, and we've been working with U.S. Forest Service and FEMA to prepare the definition of what is a hazard tree and how do we evaluate each tree within the area that we're looking at. So with guidance from the Forest Service and FEMA, we've established the following criteria. The tree needs to be tall enough to fall onto a structure, a county-maintained road, or a county-maintained trail. If a tree's diameter is 6 inches or greater, measured 4.5 feet above the ground on the uphill side of the tree. So trees smaller than 6 inches are not going to be a hazard tree. If the tree was within 60 foot of the center line of a county-maintained road or 60 feet of a county-maintained trail, it would be a hazard tree. And probably the most important definition is a hazard tree is a tree is a hazard if it is dead or likely to die. And the following criteria for that is all needles and or leaves are burned off, or the crown volume is scorched greater than 50%, or the cambium hill circumference is greater than 50% at the root, trunks, or root collar. The county didn't come up with this definition of hazard tree by itself. It was done with the guidance of the U.S. Forest Service, based upon published data, and also with the FEMA requirements. So our project is to mitigate hazard trees along county-maintained roadways and county-maintained parks and trails. And we've kind of prepared a general depiction of what that would look like. 60 feet on each side of the roadway center line and trail center line. What you should know is that this is the area that we're going to evaluate trees. It doesn't mean that we're going to remove trees in this area. We're going to evaluate all the trees within this area to determine if they meet the criteria for hazard trees. The county is not going to be removing trees from privately maintained roadways, and will not be looking at trees or removing trees from private property beyond the 60 feet from the roadway center line. So we had to estimate the number of trees within this area to be able to prepare a scope of work for a contractor to assist us with the evaluation of the trees and then also the removal of the trees. We estimated about 9,300 hazard trees within our right-of-way and adjacent to the 60 miles of maintained roads within the burn area. But what we also know is that Mountain View Electric is also going to be doing evaluations and removals adjacent to the right-of-way as well, because many of the right-of-ways, as you know, has the overhead electric lines adjacent to it. So they will be removing trees within that area, and what we had to do is reduce our estimate by a certain percentage to accommodate for the removals that they will be doing. So based upon that, we have estimated about $7,000 trees to accommodate for those tree removals. What we also know is that there are many private properties adjacent to the roadways, and there's about 1,285 private properties within the burn area adjacent to the right-of-ways. Not all of those will have burned trees on them, not all of those have trees on them, but those are the amount of properties that we anticipate to be looking at and evaluating with permission. The parks also estimated about 6,300 hazard trees along their 6 miles of trail within the burn area, and they also looked 60 feet beyond their center line. We also have been doing a great deal of, kind of walk back. This estimate that we did was not based upon going out and counting each of the trees. We just don't have enough staff to do that, and to be able to determine the amount of hazard trees, we actually have to go through the criteria to evaluate that. So what we did is we established an estimate based upon our visual inspection. And what we had to do was use this to establish the basis to obtain funding from FEMA. What you should know and what's important is that each tree has to be evaluated separately based upon that criteria. And it was unrealistic to be able to count and evaluate every tree before we moved into the contracting phase. We, as you know, as I spoke to previously, Mountain View Electric has removals that they will also, or evaluations and removals that they will also be doing in the Black Forest area. So we have been doing a lot of coordination with Mountain View Electric. We worked with them and have a joint criteria on what is called a hazard tree. We are anticipating to coordinate with our contractors in advance of the project and continue that coordination on a daily and weekly basis with them during the project. Just want to talk a little bit about how the trees will be cut down. Hazard trees within the right-of-way will be cut flush to the ground and then disposed of. The stumps below the ground will remain in place. In the parks, what they're going to do is they're going to cut about half of the trees. They're going to cut them flush to the ground surface, and they're going to use some of the branches, and they're going to be spread, the trunks will remain on site and the stumps will remain in place. The branches and some of that wood from the trees will be used on the park area as erosion control. And then about the other half will be fell flush to the ground surface, and they will also be disposed of. In the private properties, we anticipate to fell the trees. How the contract is written today is to fell the trees 3 inches above the ground surface and dispose of, and the stumps to remain in place. The reason why is 3 inches is considered, above 3 inches is considered a trip hazard, but what we anticipate to do is to work with the property owners, not only on how the trees are cut, but also on how the tree will be removed. Some property owners may want to keep the trees to be able to use them within their properties for erosion control. So with the individual property owners, we will be working with them on how we cut down the trees and remove them. We anticipate to have 2 contracts for our Board of County Commissioners consideration. One contract is a monitoring consultant, a construction management consultant that will provide oversight on behalf of the county. And then the second one will be doing the actual removals. And I'll talk a little bit about each contractor. Our consultant will make sure that all work meets the specifications and is documented, and we will be coordinating with the county, Mountain View Electric, and all the private property owners. Their key duties include providing a certified arborist to evaluate and mark the trees per the established criteria that we already discussed. What you should know about an arborist is that they are a trained professional in the cultivation and management and the study of individual trees. They're different from a forester who looks at the trees from a forest standpoint. An arborist is a specialist on individual trees. This contractor will document all the trees before and after removal. They will review the contractor's schedules and how they anticipate handling traffic if they're in the right-of-way. They will evaluate and enforce the erosion control and all the environmental requirements. The contractor will have equipment, and we need to make sure that any disturbed area is reseeded, and if there are any environmental requirements, any floodplains that they're working in, that they meet all those requirements. This contractor is going to be key to working with the public and the public communications piece of it. That is critical for the success of this project. They will provide and maintain a public website, they will have email and phone line, and they will be responsible for consistent and frequent messaging. They will be presenting information to the public, receiving questions, comments, and then be responding to those in a timely manner. We anticipate that this contractor will also be coordinating with any of the established organizations that the Black Forest area has already established, such as Black Forest Together. And one of the keys of this contractor is that they have experience with FEMA. The county has to meet certain requirements to ensure that we're working within the guidelines of the federal money that is anticipated for this project. We also anticipate that this consultant, and we have presented this to the board, and they continued it for this additional public process. We will be making a presentation to the board on December 31st, and True North is the proposed contractor. They anticipate using 85% local personnel. So we'll see those monies going back into the economy. They will be hiring personnel within El Paso County to assist them with this work. We also, the second contractor that I spoke to is the contractor that will actually do and complete the tree removal. And the specifications, as I discussed previously, vary for the county right-of-way parks and the private areas. They will oversee the traffic control and make sure that, they will complete the traffic control. They will do the erosion control, do the best management practice, and they will be responsible for all the environmental compliance. one of the questions that we've had a lot of, one of the items that we've had a lot of questions of is what will be done with the removed trees. And the contractor, per the contract specifications, will have to provide us with the final disposal site that they designate, and that will have to be approved by the county. We also, in the contract, encourage that contractor to use the trees as lumber or other wood products so that they would be reused. And at this point, the mitigation contractor, we anticipate that they will be using 80% local personnel. The county will provide oversight for all of this work. So the question is how is this project funded? The President declared that the Black Forest wildfire was a national disaster, and as a result, the county, along with Mountain View Electric, provided estimated costs for this work and to the federal FEMA. And the costs included the costs included not only tree removal, but other work within the Black Forest. But what we're here today to talk about is the tree removal. We had to submit an estimated number of hazard trees to FEMA to establish a basis for funding. After that, what we had to do was prepare a scope of work for the mitigation and also the oversight, and we coordinated that both with U.S. Forest Service and as well with FEMA, and their comments and were included in the RFP. FEMA is going to provide the county reimbursement for 75% of the actual costs. So if the county incurs more costs than what we estimated, they will reimburse us for the actual cost. And the county is responsible for the remaining 25%. The work was originally required to be completed by January 26th of 2014, but because we had a lot of process to go through and coordination with the public, and there's a lot of procurement requirements, we have requested an extension, and at this point we've received a verbal approval for that extension, and that extension is another 6 months, so July 26th, 2014.
I have a question. There's first two lines right there. Said the President declared the Black Forest fire a natural disaster. What about the public, the people? The people of Black Forest have more hazardous trees than the county owned property. What about the declaration for them? Is there one? Was there one? And the county commissioners didn't get that approved? Or what happened to that? Did it slip through the cracks?
There's certain sources, and sorry to
No, go ahead.
There's certain sources of funding for assistance, and this is for public funding. And the reason why we are looking at certain portions and the right-of-way is that that impacts the public portion and is a public life and health safety. And that's why we are able to get the funding for certain portions.
I can see the county getting funding for clearing right-of-ways, but I see people up there marking off the paint that you paint on some of the trees, and some of the trees are live, and they don't want you on their property. They want the live trees, what they have left, to stay there. The people in Black Forest have far more hazardous trees than county-owned, and like Mountain View Electric, for instance. They received, what, $6 million to do the mitigation removals of the grid access that Mountain View Electric is charging the people. Grid access, my bill is $26 a month, every single month for the same thing, grid access, and then now they're getting FEMA money on top of billing us.
Well, I think in that case, you have to have Mountain View Electric address that. And I can't answer Mountain View Electric's. I think they're here tonight, and maybe they can talk to that. In regards to the private and the private land, I'll kind of get to that. But as far as, and our removals on private property, I'll get to that. But as far as private assistance, I think there are outlets out there. I can't answer that. I'm talking about what the county is doing, but I think that that's something that Black Forest Together and other entities, and some people had private insurance. Some people don't. I know that. But what I can talk to you about tonight is what the county is doing with regards to making sure that people that are traveling within the county right-of-way are safe. But I'll get to the private properties and how we're going to be dealing with the private property owners.
Did you mean July 26th, 15 or 14?
2014.
Okay, because at first you said December 26th.
Well,
14.
December 26th of 2014, it was, sorry, January 26th of 2014 was the original requirement completion date. We requested an extension, and that extension is a 6-month extension to July 26, 2014. So just want to talk to you a little bit about our procurement process for our monitoring company. We originally wanted to do a lot of this work in-house to oversee the project, but what we found out is that this is a lot of work, and the county doesn't have internal staff to be able to do that. So our procurement people came and looked through our on-call contractors that we have already on board with the county, and they didn't have the qualifications to be able to assist us. So what they worked with is they have a cooperative agreement with the Houston-Galveston Area Council of Governments, who had already received competitive bids for this type of work. So we were provided a list of contractors who are familiar and are experts at this type of work. And so it all met the FEMA requirements for this kind of contractor. So we sent several of those contractors scopes of work. We reviewed the scopes of work and looked at their contracts for applicability, pricing, and terms and conditions. We sent out the scope, received proposals back, and we met regarding 4 of the responses, and we selected True North to submit to the Board of County Commissioners. We spoke with the Board of County Commissioners on November 26th, and were asked to, they did not approve the contract at that time. They asked for a little bit more public process, and then we anticipate presenting that contract to the board on the 31st of December. Our procurement process is still in process with our mitigation contractor. This is the contractor who would actually go out and cut down the trees. We, kind of going back again, we met with many local, state, to develop the scope of work. We sent the scope of work to FEMA and U.S. Forest Service for review and approval. We received those comments. We published that contract in 3 papers on the county webpage, sent 70 vendor notices to vendors in-state and out within El Paso County, 52 of those in El Paso County. We had a pre-proposal meeting that was held where we talked to all the firms. 18 of those firms attended, 5 of those are in El Paso County. They asked us a bunch of questions. We had a specific date that the questions were due. We answered all those questions, sent out answers to all of those questions, and then the proposals were due. We participated in an evaluation committee meeting, and then had some additional clarifications for some of the vendors, and then we sent those clarifications out, received those responses back, and proceeded with a final ranking. And we have a proposed contractor selection to bring for consideration for our board on December 31st. That contract is still in the procurement process, so there's limited information that I can give to you about that. But what I can tell you is that we do have a proposed contractor to bring forth for consideration.
Can you say whether it's a local one from the county?
I can't. So I just wanted to,
I got a question, Rick. Is that I know in the city of Colorado Springs, I don't even think there's anywhere near 52 licensed tree services. I know in El Paso County, there's probably, I know there's quite a few in Black Forest, but I find it hard that 52 local tree services were notified in reference to that. Were you notified? I know I wasn't.
well, we have a standard vendor list that you can apply to, and I'm not a procurement expert, so I can get you more information about that if you.
What do you consider local? Because you said that 80% of the,
Well, can I answer your question first?
sure.
I mean, we have a standard vendor list that vendors can come to the county and apply, and to be on a vendor list. I don't have that information here. If you leave your name and number with me, I can have our procurement officer follow up with you. But it's not just tree vendors, it could be general contractors, it's people that we're aware of. So, and also notices were in the paper and on our website. This follows our procurement policy and all of our standard regulations and practices.
Well, I would assume you would want, a company licensed arborist to do the mitigation contracting work to cut down trees. I don't
Yes.
think you guys are going to be, hiring somebody with an excavator to go in there and just bulldoze
Sure,
it.
but I mean, some of those contractors could sub and do a large portion of the work, so if you give me your information, we can follow up with you on the details. I can have the procurement officer follow up with you on that, okay?
And then you said 80%, go back a couple of pages, as far as the contractor, the mitigation contractor and the other contractor,
Sure.
that they're supposedly gonna have 80% of local, or hire 80% of local people.
Sure, that's
to do
something that we can include in our contracts as a requirement. Every contract that we have, we require contractors to provide us with a sub-list, and so we review those and approve those before they're able
Are
to
they
use them.
restricted to that sub-list? Or is it an open bid?
The prime, Judy, as you know, the prime will send out, they have to give us 85% or 80%, whichever contract it is. They have to provide local labor. It will be local labor. And so they have to give us
Right,
that
but
list.
are
So
you
if
gonna
you're-
draw from your restricted list for local labor, or will it be an open bid process?
The contractor will
The
work
prime will
with,
do that.
the prime will do that.
There's a huge difference between local labor and hiring local tree services. I mean, there's a huge difference.
I think we'd all like to see that 80% of the money stay in the
Stay in
community,
Colorado.
not 80% of the
stay-
laborers.
Yeah.
They could have 100 employees taking out 13,000 trees and only 80 of them came from El Paso County, of which $300,000 goes to this out-of-state company and whatever,
And
$100,000
minimum wage
stays
goes
in town.
to 80% of the labor force.
So what you're asking for is you want 85% businesses, correct?
What I think
So
is,
then my question to you is, and let's take it, so I understand it, because I want to get it right. What you're saying is you want 85% of the tree removal businesses to do the work, correct?
I'd like 100%, but
Well,
I'll
I
settle for
understand that,
65.
but that's, I mean, we made it, I don't know where it's at, and I honestly don't know where we're at, but, so my question is you want 85% businesses? Because
local
you're-
licensed tree services.
Okay, local licensed tree services, and then how do I know that you're hiring local folks to do the work?
Well, because we are local companies, we're not gonna hire somebody from Texas.
You say that, but how do I validate? In other words, what we're trying to do is keep the money and the labor, so what, let me.
You could ask us the same
Yeah,
questions
so
that you
what
asked
I'll do-
them, and we would
Right.
be subject to that same audit.
Absolutely.
Right, so what I'll do is I'll get with the contracting officer and figure out, get that definition, just give us your contact information.
Yeah, but Asplund is the person who's got the MBA contract, and they're hiring people who are working for basic minimum wage, and all that money is going to Asplund.
Well, I can't speak to that, so.
Well, that's the same list that you guys are working off of. You're
Rob,
working off
you-
those same
you're making-
contractors.
Rob, you're making assumptions here, I can't speak to that.
Then
And
tell us
Aspen's
who
not a
the
local
contractor is.
company anyways.
Right, no, okay, that's good to know, so just give me your stuff and we'll check into that, because I think that's a good question.
My thought is, just to go a little bit more, is if there was a good thing that came out of this fire, if you could say there was,
Sure.
it would be that we have all this money coming in to feed our local economy. Well, if we turn around and write checks to somebody out of state, then it was here and gone and did nothing for this economy.
Absolutely.
Here,
Okay, and so we'll answer that, I'll get you an answer to that question, because I
Thank you.
honestly, I don't know down to that detail, I don't know.
I'm concerned that I did put together a proposal for this, and it was a really, really aggressive plan. I've got 3 certified arborists on my staff, and I never made a short list.
So you
I-
bid on this
I
contract,
did,
which one,
yes,
the
sir.
contract, the removal?
The tree removal portion,
Tree
yes, sir.
removal, and we haven't awarded that yet, so.
Right, but she did say that a short list was already determined.
For the
But they
monitoring.
can't tell us who it is.
And I believe there was
Not
3719 local area codes that bid on it, period. I mean, I didn't know about it, we're different companies.
I hear, okay.
So because nobody's contacted me, I can assume that I didn't make the short list, even though when I look at my numbers, I know that there's not anybody doing it as cheap as what I put in, and I'm local. I don't understand it. So that tells me that it's somebody out of state.
Well, I asked about this, and I was told, and I think Jennifer told about this, that this is an RFP, it's not, an open bid process. And so, until the request goes to the commissioners to fund that contract that's been chosen already, okay, nobody knows who it is. I said, well, could you at least tell us if it's local or not? And the answer is no. So this is not really an open process, and it certainly wasn't for the
Well-
mitigation either,
Well,
because that was only fielded to Texas companies.
Judy,
So,
we have a procurement process, and you asked about that,
Yeah.
we provided you, there's federal regulations and local state regulations related to procurement. I'm not the expert, Brenda
yeah,
is,
I'm
but
not
she
blaming
provided
you.
you that
I'm just stating
information.
what's happened.
Okay,
It hasn't been transparent.
Judy, I appreciate that. We want to stay on task. We have the action to follow up with you. We want to continue the presentation, but we will get an answer to that because that's a valid
Absolutely,
question.
please see me guys, because I want
Thank
to
you.
get in, because I think that's a good question.
Now,
Thank you.
do we have to go through that Houston company in order to get FEMA money? Or is that something that the county could possibly hire someone like, say, Dennis Will, that's a forester, or
Sure, let's do this, let's finish this, and then
Okay.
I can talk to you on the side, because I think you understand prime and sub, right?
Yeah.
You probably do it all the time, and that's kind of where we're at with those two contracts, it's prime and sub, so they'd be the prime and you would be the sub to that contract.
So just to briefly go,
Mayor, the county can hire anyone that qualifies, anyone that qualifies.
so just wanted to show you some of the presentations. I know many of you may not have been to all of these. This is probably the second presentation at this depth, but just wanted to talk to you about some of the presentations that we've had concerning this item. So about 6 presentations within the last couple months. And again, this presentation is not as extensive as this, but we will have staff available after this presentation, and we have had staff available after each of these presentations to answer any questions. So hazard trees on private property. This is a big question. And what we know is that many of the people in the Black Forest, you've had a lot of impact, and we want to make sure that we're communicating with you well. And so each private property owner will receive an informational packet that includes a lot of information, including a cover letter, what we're calling a right of entry sheet, and other information. We're still in the process of working towards preparing that. But what that will include is we will be explaining the process and requesting to the property owners to enter their property. And I'll go into a little bit more detail about that. What I want you to know, and what a key thing is that it is the private property owner's decision whether or not to approve the county right of entry. It's each individual property owner's decision to either enter, to mark, or even to do hazard tree removal. Property owners can approve or deny that, and we anticipate some of the property owners who approve it will approve with conditions. If there are certain conditions that each property owner has, because each property is unique, we will work with each property owner to grant reasonable conditions to the extent that we can. Step one, we will provide a right of entry form. That right of entry form will give property owners several options. It will give property owners full permission, we give the county full permission to come onto the property, mark the trees, cut, and then remove them. And this is for some of the people who may want their trees removed and may not want to have a lot of interaction with the county. Conditional permission. This is something that property owners who wants their trees on their properties evaluated, but want to work with us to set up a time in advance to evaluate those trees. They will be given the option at that point whether they want us to mark them, or again, another option of whether they want to cut those trees. We anticipate this would be a good option for many of the people who currently reside on their properties. And then a third option is to just deny permission. And what we'll include in the right of entry is if the property owner does not want to grant right of entry, we're going to give them the information about their liability that they may cause for any result of trees falling in the right of way. We're not trying to scare anybody about this, but what we want to do is be able to give people information about any denial of permission. And then a possible additional waiver. And then this will be included in the right of entry form, but it can be separated if people want to.
I have a question. Go ahead.
You say you're going to contact these people. How are you going to contact them? Most of them are displaced. Someone went up there and put this huge water tank on Swan Road. 2-3 days after the fire, they started work on it. I mean, immediately. They had crews from all over working, putting that big, huge, ugly water tank in our forest. People were not notified. They received, 4 of them I know of, received mail addressed to someone else in their name, had different addresses on it. So how are you going to locate? And another question is, will you receive back written authorization for you to enter private property if you can't locate them? Not just, oh well, we sent it to that address, we didn't hear from them, so we're going to cut them.
We are not going to do anything without the permission of each individual
Written
property.
permission.
Written. And I understand your point of, we're going to be sending out initial letters to all the property owners via certified mail. And we understand that many of these people are displaced. We will be working with the community organizations that have been established. Many of those have contacts lists, so we anticipate working towards that. We know that we will not be able to use just our assessor's database for property ownership, and that our contract will have to work with us to get that done.
Why are you in such a hurry to remove, and first of all, why are you saying these are extremely hazardous trees when
Let's stay on topic. I understand.
when I personally was at the Hammond Fire and I went up there just recently and examined some of the burned trees still standing, and they're still standing.
I
And these are not
understand.
going to fall down tomorrow.
I understand, but you're a little bit strained from this particular issue. Let's let her finish that, and then we'll open it up.
Okay.
So, county trees on private
Jennifer,
property.
could you say one other thing, go back to slide, please? The sentence that says this is about liability, this is true regardless of the disclaimer, but having documented notice is always a good thing. I think the point here is that if you own a tree, you have liability before the fire, after the fire, or whatever, you're the owner of that tree. Okay, so the fire doesn't make any difference. Okay, so,
Thanks, Judy.
yeah. Another question.
Just a question, what about the trees that have already been marked on my property?
I believe that's Mountain View, and as I said, there are overlaps, and We understand that there are overlaps, and so we will be coordinating with Mountain View. So we will ensure that, obviously, we can't cut down the same tree at the same time, but I think Mountain View can probably speak at the end about what they're doing.
That is Mountain View Electric coming around on private property. They enter your property, mark trees, and they will be cutting down unless you call them and tell them to stay off your property, or do not touch certain trees on your property. I've lived here 21 years. I'll introduce myself. I'm Darryl Fortner, Dundee Tree Service. I've been a tree surgeon for 41 years. I've been all over the country. I've helped them with the Hayman Fire, Wallow Canyon Fire, here in the Black Forest, my own neighbors. I lost my home, my 4 German Shepherds, the firefighters buried them, and I'm here to save trees, not let someone from Texas, FEMA, or money, or the county, or Mountain View Electric cut down all our trees. The ones we have left that are alive, near a power line, they're marking. They want to cut them down because they may reach the power line. They will stay there as long as we're going to live. They're afraid they're going to fall, but they're not.
Why don't you let him finish the presentation so we can see what's going on?
So just to give you a little bit more information, trees within the right-of-way, based upon
You can ask me to leave all you want to, but I'm not leaving.
trees within the right-of-way, the county has the ability to go out, because we have, per statute, legal ability to go out and remove the trees that we feel necessary, are able to, could be able to fall and pose a serious life, safety, and welfare threat to the citizens of El Paso County. Within an easement, some people may have a question. There is a difference between easement and right-of-way. An easement is a right to use land owned by another person or entity. The title does not shift. You own that property, and there is an obligation by the easement holder to maintain the easement for the purposes, for its purposes, such as utilities. Why do we want to remove trees from private property? Removing hazard trees that exist on private property beyond the right-of-way will significantly reduce the chances of dead trees falling into the roadways and right-of-ways, thereby providing a safe environment. These trees can fall and kill people. How will the hazard trees be removed from the right-of-way? As I stated before, we will have a contractor coordinating with each property owner to obtain the right of entry, get the approval to enter the property, to evaluate the trees, to mark the hazard trees, and to complete the hazard tree removal. The point of this is that the individual property owner, again, is in control of the process. Our consultant will work with each property owner to evaluate the trees adjacent to the right-of-way and mark them when we have permission. And then what we will be doing is, if we have permission, our contractor will be removing those. They will be cut down to 3 inches above the ground, and the trunk branches will be hauled away or chipped. But we also know is some of the property owners want some of that to remain on the property. We will be working with the individual property owners on how they want their property left. Once the county is granted right of entry, how will our contractor access the property? Again, the property owner is in control of that. We will only access the property how we have coordinated that with the property owner. Some of the property owners have fences. We will have to accommodate that. Some of the property owners may want us to access from driveways. We will work with each individual property owner, if they do want trees cut down, to enter the property how they choose to let us enter the property. When will we be doing this? We anticipate bringing forth contracts to our board for consideration on December 31st. So there would be no tree removals prior to January 2014. And then, as I stated before, it is not anticipated the work would extend a lot beyond our completion date of July 2014. What you should also know is the exact timing of individual property removal will be determined in advance. So you guys have lives, you have work, you have things going on, so we will be coordinating around your schedules to work with you. And then some of you have livestock on your property, some of you have special conditions on your property. We want to know about those. And so we will have a special conditions section on there that you want to let us know about those beforehand so that we can coordinate that with you prior to entering the property.
Okay, at this point in time, we will open it up for questions, and I will call, if you raise your hand and you have a question, I will recognize you. I ask you to be respectful of staff and realize we're here to try to provide as many answers that we can to this process. However, we're going to make sure that we have a productive and respectful meeting. And if you can follow that, then we will stay and try to answer the questions as we can. But if it turns into something that we cannot control, I will shut the meeting down. And I'm specifically addressing one individual, but I want to be respectful of your time. So if you have any questions, we'll start addressing those now. Yes, sir.
What's a person's name at Mountain View that we can contact to find out whether they've got trees on a given on my property, for example?
We have to have a representative from Mountain View here.
My name is Claude Hughley. I'm the Mountain View Electric Operations Manager. So we have business cards here if you need them. We're willing to talk to you about them. And one thing I wanted to clear up is that it was us that marked the trees, not the county. And one thing that I want to point out is that if it's outside the easement, we cannot remove those trees without your approval. So if they were marked, we have to have your approval before that they can be removed. So we'd be more than willing to visit with you about those trees.
What about the trees in?
In the easement, because of some of the things that the county talked about, if they're within the easement, it's really a public safety. It's a hazard. And those are the ones that we are looking at and will be clear cutting our easements.
Many of ours are marked, and I have green trees on my property.
Yeah. The only
And
thing
you've marked several of them that are not dangerous, and you've not returned my calls from the last few days. I know you said you were gonna look at my property, but you haven't done it.
Cahosa,
Yes.
I left you a message yesterday that said I would be up there tomorrow to look at it.
Yeah, if you called on my number, tell me.
It was last name is,
Like it?
yeah, I left a message on a cell phone that I had previously.
Sir, are you able to give him your contact information so he can follow up with that?
While he's looking, let me finish my question. Does your data say, this address, we marked X number of trees, or we didn't mark any? In other words, I don't know if you've marked 20 trees or not. I'm not there,
Yeah.
okay?
We started in the areas from Black Forest Road west, north of Shoe. In that section was completely marked. We have probably about 90% in between Black Forest Road and Bessie that was marked. It was brought to our attention that we were on private property. We backed off, so the only ones that we are marking now are letters of authorization or letter agreements that we got back. So those are the ones that we are marking at this time.
So if I haven't heard from you, you haven't done anything.
Probably
Is that
not,
right?
yes.
Okay, just trying to understand how much attention I have to put before somebody comes and takes some of my trees that are still green.
No one will
And
Yeah.
the
cut
other
a tree
thing to
without
point out,
written permission.
yeah, the other thing to point out is all we're taking is the trees that the Forest Service said had less than 50% chance of surviving, or ones that are completely burnt and completely dead. Those are the only ones with FEMA money that we are using that we can take out at this time.
I have a question for you.
Sir, you need to be recognized.
Could you advise your
Sir, I already gave
company
you a
not to
warning.
enter private property without written permission?
You just said it wouldn't. You just said it wouldn't.
We've got some
And we got,
pushback
we're
on
doing the
that.
same
We
thing.
are
County's doing the same thing.
I'm going to say it one
When
more
I try to speak, don't try to speak over me.
Ladies and gentlemen,
I
do
won't
you
try to
understand
speak
if I
over
have
you.
to shut this meeting down?
Yeah, Darryl, you need to back off.
Do you understand that? I mean, I understand how frustrated you are. We want to have a very productive meeting, but we have to control because everybody has a lot of concerns.
We want to be able to ask and have answers.
And you will be recognized, but you have been able to address this particular audience at least 5 times. I want to be able to open up to other people. So if you're going to allow me to continue, we can continue the meeting. But if you're going to continue with the outburst, I'll have to shut it down.
If I have a question, I'd like to ask it, that's all I ask.
As long as I recognize it.
Thank you.
Questions in the back? Not to put anybody on the spot back there. Yes, ma'am.
Now, are we talking about clear cutting for the county on the road or just the hazardous trees?
Just, we are not going to clear cut within the right of way. We are cutting per the criteria that U.S. Forest Service has established. So no, we will not clear cut.
Okay, now what about the dead trees that, are you cutting them even though they're less than, say, 30 feet tall? Because the only thing I've seen marked are my big tall trees. All the little trees are left, and even the ones that are burned. And I sure hate to end up with 5 acres and no trees.
I think the marked ones, the ones that have been marked are per Mountain View. I think it would be good for you to follow up with Claude. And as the county comes and marks and gets permission to enter property from you, we will provide you the opportunity to work with our contractor as we mark the trees and go through that with them. So.
The other thing that bothers me is you want me to sign away and say I won't hold you liable. If they, no, this is for the county too. And if you guys fall a tree across my fence and I've signed that thing, then I have to replace my fence myself?
No. If our contractor creates any damage to your fence, our contractor will be responsible to fix that and replace that. We will work with each individual property owners. So if there's an issue with our contractor, they will be responsible for that, and we will coordinate with you to make sure that that is replaced in kind.
Okay, because I mean, when you sign away that you're not liable, it means you don't have to pay for anything. And I'm not willing to sign a contract with anybody that says they're not liable for what they're doing.
Can I address that, the insurance question?
Yes, sir.
My name's Darryl. I work with Mountain View. The original agreement that we sent out was very strict. I understand exactly what you're talking about. We have revised a new one that's has softer language, it's more specific, that you're liable for the trees that aren't cut that were identified. That's one thing that we're really trying to talk about. We do have FEMA guidelines within the agreement, and that's kind of somewhere that strong language comes from. But in both agreements that we have right now, there are lines available for you to put your own requirements in and your own statements in, and we can agree to that on any basis.
And if you have questions about our right of entry when you get them, and they're beyond what our contractor can respond to, and you have legal questions related to that liability, we can coordinate with our county attorney to discuss that with you.
Right there, and then I'll come to you.
I have two concerns that relate to this, and first of all is the trees that are still have green, but you're talking about a 50-50 chance of survival. Many of us lost a whole lot of trees, and for us, we'd like to hang on to as many as we possibly could. And it seems like the contract that says 50-50, it's gone, and we'd like to give it a 50-50 and let's see if we can have another year or something that it might live, because we had a lot of rain last fall, and I think that's going to help those marginal trees. And so, to me, it's hasty to do this. They're not going to fall over in a year. We've got time to work on this. And secondly, as soon as we get FEMA involved in this, we start to get complications. And sure, it sounds like free money, but we're still taxpayers and we're still paying for it. And it seems like the complications they bring in take it out of local control. And it just bothers me to do it that way. I wish it could stay under county control.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, my comment is just one of my neighbors is out of town until next April. And how's he going to be able to participate in this? He does have several trees on his property, and I know that y'all are going to be looking to go on his property to do this. You know, he's, I don't know that you can get hold of him. I don't know if these papers gonna reach him or if they're gonna have to come to me. So, and I can't give permission for him.
Sure, but if his mail is being, I mean, we realize that we're gonna do our best to contact each of these property owners, and it may be through various ways. We may not reach everybody, but we will do our best.
Okay. Another thing, and just to add to Terry's comment, many of these trees, you know, the ponderosa pine has its own natural ability to be fire resistant. And even the trees on my property that have got burned on the bottom of them are not damaged at all. You know, the fire resistance of the ponderosa pine is very good in many cases. It's much better than many of the spruce trees out there. And a lot of these trees that even, you know, I'm not saying anything about you, but Mount View and Mark and around properties and things like that may survive. And you know, at 50% of needles on the tree that are still green, there is a high likelihood of those trees surviving. Now, you know, I'm coming from experience. I've worked with the experimental forest. My parents started a tree service in 1962. It is since closed, but I happen to be Chuck Leggett, and I'm very heavily involved in tree services in this area and working with ponderosa pine.
Yes, sir. I have a two-part question. First part is, when is the anticipated beginning of the cutting process, and when is it expected to finish? That's the first question.
We have to complete a contract with our contractor, and he has to get many things in place. So I don't anticipate that would be before January 1st. It probably will not be. It'll probably be within the months afterwards. We will be doing public notices and sending out these right of entry forms to make sure that property owners are informed. Does that make any
That's
sense?
sufficient. The reason I asked that question is, now here's the second one. Many of the tree experts I've talked to said that, particularly if there's any green on any of these trees, you need to wait at least, at a minimum, 1 whole year to even make a determination of whether that tree's going to die or not. And it doesn't sound like I'm getting that flavor of the rush to get this done because of where the money's coming from or whatever. That we need to, like Terry said, give these trees every opportunity to keep them. And the rush to get them out of the right-of-way or from NVA or the county when they're not truly a hazardous tree, because even the dead ones, the sticks, will stand for a year before they become truly hazardous. So here we're talking about the ones that we want to give a chance to grow, continue to live. We need to put every effort we can into saying, we're giving that one a chance. And so how are we going to do that if we're going to rush off in June or April and start cutting trees? You know, it hasn't even been a year yet. So that's something I think everybody in this room and everybody in Black Forest is still concerned about. And I don't think I have trees that are in the right of way that are burned. I have other trees that are severely damaged, but they're not in the right of way. So I'm speaking from everybody I've talked to and what I've heard, trying to pull this down to an essential piece, and that is we want to keep the trees that have a chance. So we have to give them that chance. So we have to figure out how to make that process you're working on work and give these trees a chance. And it might mean somebody has to do a little extra work, and it might mean somebody has to say, we unmarked that tree we marked already. That's all I'm saying. I think other people will probably, in general, will agree with this. We want to save our trees when there is a possibility to save them.
I'll just let you know that, like I said from the very beginning, each private property owner is in control of the trees on their property, and we will work with you. If you don't want any trees cut down, no trees will be cut down. But there are also, what we need to understand, there are also a lot of people who have come to us and said, please cut my trees down. So we will be working with each individual property owner. You are in control of that of your property with respect to how the county is approaching it and our contract. Mountain View has a little bit different requirements based upon some of their work. and they can speak to that, but within the county, each private property owner will be in control of that work.
Yes, ma'am.
In the letter from Mountain View, it stated that if you received insurance money, that they could come after you and bill you to get reimbursement to what FEMA doesn't pay. And I wondered whether or not the county would come after our insurance money also.
What that is in regards to is that there's a requirement by FEMA. That is language that is required by FEMA. And essentially what they're trying to make sure of is that people are not getting money from their insurance companies before and cutting down and not using that. And so essentially it's a safeguard that people are not getting essentially double monies. That's a federal requirement. That is language that was required by FEMA for both us and Mountain View to put in those letters.
So there's a possibility we can be billed for tree removal.
No, what we're trying to get information on in advance is for you to say, I've already gotten, for you to notify us if you've gotten monies from your insurance companies for that tree removal. At that point, we won't be doing any tree removal on your property. Does that make any sense?
So if I got insurance money, I tell you, you can't come on my property.
You can say we can't go on your property, and either way.
And either way,
Yeah.
Until they have
Well, I've already
control.
done that,
yeah.
because
Yeah.
I won't allow them on the property. But I just wonder how they could bill me for this when it was given to me to do what I want with it to get rid of my trees.
It's a notification that we're required to get. So, it's supposed to be an insurance that you're not getting paid twice for the same thing.
Rob, you had a question?
Yeah, Darryl, it's around about the size of the contract, and I tried to raise this a little bit yesterday. You guys had estimated 7,000 in round figures trees. Mountain View has estimated, I think, 20,500. I was corrected by Claude yesterday. And I guess question number one is Mountain View has decided with a smaller staff to be able to approach the management of the FEMA portion by themselves. And I guess I would just like some commentary as to why the county has decided to spend, it looks like $350,000 to be able to get people to take pictures of dead trees on 300,000 feet of roadway.
Well, I do want to talk about your process first, because your process is certainly different than ours. You're talking apples and oranges. They're two different processes.
They're on one side of the road, you're on the other.
So the deal is, on that particular case, FEMA has, as someone else said here, FEMA has some very strict guidelines, which can make it very difficult and obviously makes it complicated to some extent. We don't have the experience in the county to do that. So we're asking the management team to come in and follow the FEMA guidelines. They already have the equipment, they already have the forms, they already have a lot of experience with FEMA, so that way the process should go much quicker. The number that you give is up to. So that doesn't mean they'll go out and spend the entire $300, whatever it is, $1,000. It's up to that point, based on our estimated trees. I think the estimated trees that we have is actually high. I don't think we're going to have that many trees removed, because to be honest with you, there's a lot of residents that say, we don't want you on our property, and we're good with that. We're okay with that, that's fine. So the right-of-way is what we'll be, I think, mostly dealing with. I don't know that we're going to have that many trees to do with. So it's up to you.
Let me go in the way back and then I'll come to you, sir.
I think this question about insurance is an important one to clarify, both for Mountain View and the county. Because when I got that letter and looked at mine, it said, have you received insurance money for removal of trees? And then I received insurance money for loss of trees. It doesn't specify removal of trees. So I think the language needs to be clear so that people understand. And it's like, oh crap, I gotta go back and read the whole freaking policy again to figure this one out, to know which box I checked. So some help for people on clarifying what insurance that specifically applies to. And what we ended up doing is the loss I recovered from was for 250 feet from the house. And so we went out and measured the other day, and all the trees that people want to cut down are further than 250 feet from the house. So I said, okay, I'm good, but some help on clarifying what policies cover and how to figure it out might be helpful.
Well, that's good input. We'll talk to Steve about that when we do our letter, make sure that that's clear.
Yes, sir.
The other thing is, I don't know how other people have been treated, but the amount of money I've been given for trees on my property is a little bit ridiculous. So I'm going around and looking, trying to get the best price I can, and figure out the best way I can do it. Well, I don't know how much I'm going to be charged for this contractor to take my trees down. They might take all of that, as far as I know, because it's not a lot, all right? And we've lost 500 trees. We're going to be cutting forever. So, you know, I want to save that money to do what I want to do with it.
And you're not being charged to remove the trees that are within that 30-foot span. You are not being charged a dime for that. But the insurance company, I don't know why they think, I mean, we're not charging for that. So I don't know why. We'll have to check the insurance language on that to find out what's going on. But we're not charging you.
Right.
We just need your permission to say, yeah, you're going to take it. We're not going to let you touch it.
Is that the same with the dues?
Yes. Let me go to you and then back here, and then you, since you have your, go ahead, sir.
I think how most homeowners insurance policies read is that you can recoup up to $100 per tree. That would be the cost of removal and replacement. So if you lose a 50-foot tall ponderosa pine, there's no way that you're going to be able to cut that down for $100, and especially replace it for $100. So I would hope that as far as the insurance portion of that is concerned, if you've got other trees that you planted within your home that you cut down, $100 a tree, you know, to not only cut that tree down but also replace it is, you know, grossly, and for all of you guys, it's ridiculous. So for that particular portion, I would assume that they would only be able to take a very, very minimal amount of that anyway, especially if you can prove that, you know, you're planning on buying, you know, a couple hundred trees, and I guarantee you they're going to cost, you know, you can definitely prove that they're going to be $100 a piece or what have you. And I would hope that they would do that. Now, as far as the county is concerned and the parks, I would like to see in the parks and in some of the right-of-ways where there's no utilities, there's no issues there, removal of only the burnt sticks. It doesn't make any sense at all to go through there and cut down a bunch of trees that have a 50-50 chance of survivability. Your guys' you know, criteria, the criteria that a lot of us have been taught is that a tree can survive with up to 75% of the cambium damage. All it needs is 25% of that cambium to survive. I believe it's 80% of the foliage can be burnt. And as long as there's 20% of that foliage burnt and the root system is okay, that there's a good chance that that tree is going to survive. Now granted, there's a really good chance that that tree's so stressed that eventually it's going to succumb to Ips beetle or mountain pine beetle. But it would be nice to see in the parks especially, and the right-of-ways, where they could do some type of an addendum to where instead of removing a lot of these trees that have a 50% chance of removal, it would be nice if they would just make that to burnt sticks. You know, whether it's 50 foot tall or 20 foot tall, if it's burnt to a crisp, we know it's not coming back. There's nothing, you know, there's no chance of that to come back. But we've seen time and time again, and I don't blame homeowners, but they're trying to save money, so they're hiring people, and they're going in there and they're just clear cutting everything. These people have no idea what they're doing. They're cutting down trees that have a good chance of surviving, and you know, when the bid is half the cost of a licensed arborist, I get it. You know, you're trying to save money and what have you. And it sounds to me like most homeowners aren't in that category where you're trying to save every tree you possibly can. Why can't the county, you know, I understand you want to get as much FEMA money as possible, but why can't this be done in stages? Get rid of what's burnt, hazardous, zero chance of survivability first, and then take a wait and see as far as some of those other trees.
Let me answer that. We're not trying to get as much FEMA money as possible. Because I gotta be honest with you, it's painful. FEMA money is painful. And it takes a lot of staff time, and it takes a lot of work in order to garner that money. What we're concerned about is public safety. That's the whole reason for this, folks. We don't want your trees. If you don't want them down, we're not gonna take them down. I mean, we've even had discussions where sometimes county right-of-way fences kind of float outside the county right-of-way, there's probably trees. We're not even looking at that. We're not trying to take anything from you. We're just looking at public safety. That's kind of our focus. The insurance question, I think, is a very good question, and we'll certainly look at that. As far as the arborist goes, we've had arborist training. Dr. Von Onfeld got involved with that. She even attended the training. We will, when the Texas company comes online, if that's who we decide that's who it is, the monitoring company, we will certainly invite folks to look at that and say, you know, is this good? We want to work with you. We're not here to work against you, okay?
If that company is getting $100 per tree to cut down, I can guarantee you.
That's different now. That's a different contract.
But that particular contract, I guarantee you, they're going to be trying to cut down as many trees as possible.
Well, and that's why we have a separate contractor to oversee that process in addition to the county staff. And I guess what I'd also say is that, I mean, there is the criteria, but what we will also do is rely on a certified arborist. I'm not a tree expert. That's why we're going to hire somebody to be able to assist with that. So, like Jim said, we're not trying to go and clear cut. We're trying to ensure the safety of the public.
There's a question here, and then I'm coming back here, and then I'll come back.
mentioned before about the right-of-way. On the agenda or whatever that we were given for the 2 meetings, it says, together with the FEMA-funded hazard tree removal projects by Mountain View, this totals 150 feet width of tree removal, including the full road ROW. MVEA can get funding for trees tall enough to reach the utility lines on their 10-foot easement, plus 50 feet into adjoining private lands. The total includes MVEA 10-foot easement, 50-foot private land, 60-foot road ROW, including pavement, width, and ditch area, plus another 30 feet of adjacent private land for the county property. That sounds like a lot of footage coming into my property. I'm glad I live 400 feet off the main road.
Well, we showed you the slide of how far that we'll ask to do it, but we only have a 30-foot easement from 7 lines here. Okay, so we're not asking it. I mean, if you tell me no,
Well, that's
we don't
very
want it,
deceiving.
well, that's not my
State,
letter.
right, but I mean, what was put out was very deceiving.
Yes, sir, we'll come to you, and then we'll go back.
Yeah, to follow up on Amanda's questions. Hi, Amanda. I didn't get one of these questionnaires or whatever it was, or notice or something, so I don't know exactly what she's referring to, but what she said was, it was a on-off, black, white, yes, no, up, down kind of question. And the situation is none of those. On my property, my insurance company gave me a very small amount of money that would never, ever cover the work that has to be done if those trees die, okay? So regardless of whether they're near or in a right-of-way, I don't even have enough to start with. So if your question said, do you have money coming from your insurance company to deal with the trees, it is the wrong question, it's vague, and it doesn't elicit the proper answer that you need to hear. You need to hear more detail or a little bit different twist to that, because if you ask me that question, I go, I didn't get money to do hardly anything with my trees, regardless of whether I have a lot or not a lot. So it sounds to me like you need to rethink that question you're asking people about how to respond to whether they've got insurance money.
I think even before we ask the question, because I think each policy is different, so we'll have to do some research on that, clear that works.
Ma'am, you had a question?
I have one more.
You're next.
Is the county going to use individuals to cut these trees, or are they going to bring in the big machines like have clear cut in Black Forest? And the reason I ask, the dust is horrible. I live close to one of those clear cut areas,
Okay.
and the dust even gets to my house and my asthma.
Yeah, I don't know the answer. It's up to that contractor, the removal contractor. So we'll, thank you for that. I think that's good.
And I have one suggestion I've thought of for years. I've been in that property for over 50 years. With all these beautiful trees that grow in the roads, can't we come up with a way that those little trees could be dug up and replanted rather than wasted and get them back growing other places?
Thank you.
Yes, sir. I have a question for Madam Bueller. On grid access, only in treated areas you have grid access on the power bills.
No, it's not.
Now, check with Colorado Springs Utilities. Look at their power bills. Now, finish my question. Grid access. Now, FEMA has given you, Mountain Electric, at least $6 million to remove power poles and cut trees.
It's not true.
The customers in Black Forest are paying at least $20 to $30 per month. I'm paying it right now. I don't even have a place up there to stay in. And I'm paying $29 a month grid access for clearing the trees to have service to my open land. Now, FEMA found out that you were charging grid access on top of receiving their money. Like she brought up a point a minute ago about insurance paid you, we can't pay you. You're charging us, FEMA's not going to pay you. You'll have to reimburse them. Now, do you want to answer what you think grid access is?
Yeah, grid access is not specific to the Black Forest for every member of our cooperative. And it is the minimum cost before you start using electricity. It has nothing to do with the burn area or Black Forest issue at all.
Well, I can tell you, I'm a tree contractor and I work specifically for Southern California Edison, and grid access is clearing power lines from the trees.
That's not the case here. That is
I just
not
think
the-
I'll report
that
you
is
to
not-
FEMA. And
Please
we'll-
do. But anyway, grid access is not the same definition in Mountain View that you just described.
Maybe after
So
your
you are
meeting, you
mistaken.
two could get together and talk. Rob, did you want to, because I missed you in the...
Okay, and so I'm just trying to get my arms around how we're protected from this contract growing to a unknown number effectively, because the way the bids were processed was a per tree price, but a price essentially that incorporated the 7,000 trees that were on the roadways as well. And so if personal properties start to be included as well, if you guys, do a decent job of educating people and there's enough time and all that stuff, I think there's a great benefit to Black Forest to get the black trees in. But how do we protect Black Forest? Because it's only about 300 acres that you're talking about of frontage. How do we protect Black Forest from that growing to 60 or 70,000 trees instead of the 7,000 trees that are supposedly in this contract and that are supposedly bid for? How do we protect it? How do we keep it from being 10 times the cost of the county?
That will certainly be that's a good question. That will certainly be something we have to monitor, because we only have a finite amount of matching funds as well. So we have to kind of see how it goes initially and how they're testing and what they're pulling out and say this is dead, or it's not going to make it, or it's a hazardous tree. And that has to be an education for both them and us, as well as the public. We need to let people know. So bottom line is, if it comes out, and what you're saying, Rob, is it comes out, let's say it's 20,000 trees versus what, 7,000?
Okay.
Well, then at some point, we have to make a decision, okay, fine, then we need to cut back and just do right-of-ways. I mean, we're not, we have a finite amount of funds that we can work with, and that's it.
Well, but I think there are firms here who can do this contract on a per square footage basis instead of on a per tree basis. And if you guys, I guess my question is, why did you choose a per tree basis?
Because that's what
that
FEMA
doesn't protect.
requires. That's what
But that
FEMA
doesn't.
requires.
That's how you get paid, but that's not necessarily how you can spec the contract.
We have to spec it in accordance with the FEMA guidelines in order to get reimbursed.
What I will also tell you is that our contract will be a not to exceed contract. If we are hitting a certain
What is
dollar,
that number?
Well, we will be bringing that forth to the Board of County Commissioners with our recommendation for the contractor. But what I will tell you is that it is a not to exceed contract. If we are approaching that value and still want to propose to do more work, we will be bringing that contract back to our Board of County Commissioners. We will not be able to exceed that amount without coming back to them, through a public process and requesting that permission.
Well, except you're doing that all with the same contractor. But second question is, so you've got one tree in 10 that meets your guidelines, that's on the roadway that potentially will fall into the road going forward. And it's cut through on a berm on Herring Road, and it's a 30-foot tree, but it's only 5 inches at breast height. You guys don't get paid for that, but the way the contract is written, that tree doesn't get cut down either. And it is a hazard, it is something that's gonna have to be dealt with because it's gonna fall in the next 5 years because of its diameter. But because the way the contract's written, by per tree instead of by per acre, you guys are saying that tree just gets left.
No, it does not. What it says is the contractor will come to us and say, hey, we've got this issue, it's not within the specs, fine. And I'll send a crew out there to manage the tree. I'm not
At
limiting it.
$300 a tree?
I don't know where you get your numbers from, Rob. Where do you get your numbers from? You did this before earlier.
No,
Rob,
Claude, how much have you guys contracted per tree?
They won't tell me.
Mr. Hughley? You're at 290, is that correct?
We're at 199.80.
6 million is the contract, is that not correct?
No, it's not. It's 3.5 million.
Okay, that's different than what you guys told me in a personal meeting 3 weeks ago. You said it was $6 million for 20,500 trees.
That's
And
why
if that's in error, that's, is it $200 a tree?
we're talking about two different things. We had a potential of a $600 cost that we reported to FEMA.
Okay, and so
And
I don't know what the
now we're
price
at-
is.
Now we're at the contract. Actually, we've taken a lot of steps since that. But I would hold with that. There's a potential of $6 million of damage.
Okay, how can we protect the county from having to pay $5 million on their portion? Because potentially at the rates of trees that there are, that's what it looks like, this contract looks like on the county side.
Where are you getting the $5 million from? Help me with that. 'cause I don't
I've sent
know
you
if
the
anybody-
emails, you've got all my emails in your inbox and you haven't responded to a single one of them.
That's right, and because we're in a contracting process and you were part
You're on a
of that-
contracting process that you opened 2 machines 26 hours before the deadline. You refused to answer questions, you refused to inform anybody that you would be answering questions until 26 hours before the deadline.
I'm sorry, but we had open meetings regarding questions on the contract and failed to participate.
That's not true. Andy Cratchit was in those meetings. What are you talking about?
Okay. Okay, I gotta step in.
If
Anyway,
you have
how do we
questions
protect
about
the
our
county?
procurement process, we will certainly be able to answer those with our procurement officers.
Just for timing purposes, we have 15 more minutes for questions. Okay, Nate, go ahead, and then we'll come up to you.
On November 6th, I spoke with Mr. Hughley from Mountain View Electric about the tree cutting on private property for Mountain View Electric. And I was apprised that if there were trees that were deemed hazardous by the FEMA process outside of the lawful easement, that should the homeowner not allow the removal of the tree, and subsequently that tree fell and damaged the utility, the homeowner could be held liable for the damage. My question is, and this will be for both Mountain View and or the county, is can you present any case law where a utility or municipality has constructed infrastructure or utility in an existing condition where subsequently, either through force majeure or act of God, that there's been damage to the utility from the trees that preceded the installation, that the homeowner would be liable for that condition? Can you present case law so that we can make a determination of the risk that we're assuming by disallowing either Mountain View or the county access to our private property.
Good point.
No, that's very good.
You have to check with our legal office, 'cause I can't
That's
answer
correct.
that.
It will be determined in court if it happens.
And if you want to follow that question up with, as much as as an attorney, I love legal theory. Send me an email and ask me to send that to our county attorney and get you a response.
I think that's
Judy, and then come back. She was next.
Okay, all right. Most of you probably don't know that I've been involved in this since the 26th of November, when the first contract came through. It was my objections that deferred this and triggered public meetings and a month later decision on this. I'm concerned about the contracting process, which we've already spoke about. I'm concerned about the hazard tree criteria and applying a very strict criteria that is probably very appropriate for Mountain View because of the risk level they have with utilities, but it's inappropriate, I think, for parks, and it's certainly inappropriate for private lands. And I had suggested an alternative criteria, which I met with DOT on last week, but we didn't really discuss it because most of the meeting was taken up with these slides and rebutting what I had brought up previous to that. Yesterday, I presented a 10-page presentation to the county, which is in the public record, that deals with a lot of the stuff that we're talking about tonight. And I don't have room or time to put all of this in the paper, but what was brought up by Linda about the 150-foot area that will be impacted between Mountain View's easement, which is next to, we've got the road right away, county easement, Mountain View easement, another 50 feet on one side, and on the other side you have the road right away, maybe 10 feet of functional areas where there's trees, and then another 30 feet. It's again half as wide as Hodgett, okay? So it is a huge impact, and I think there should be more public discussion. The Black Forest Together group has had a group that's been working with contractors. We're trying to figure out ways to reduce costs on private lands. And when I look at the figures, and I've seen the contracts, I think on that Tuesday, the only people that had seen the contract that were in the room, the procurement people, the county attorney, the DOT folks that helped create it, and me. Nobody else had read it, okay? And none of you have seen these contracts, and procurement has been very nice about giving them to me. But we have a situation where a contractor is being recommended for funding, which was on the consent calendar on that Tuesday, which I intercepted, for the mitigation oversight contractor. And the other contractor is in process. We don't know the per tree bid. We don't know who the contractor is, where they're from, and we don't find out until it comes to the county commissioners for approval. I think there's some serious problems with this process. But what I really want to talk about today is the costs. Everybody is excited about all this FEMA funding. This is 75-25% cost. I use DOT's figures. They had 13,300 trees, between 6,300 on parks, 3,200 on the right-of-ways, and 3,800 on private land. At a FEMA minimum of $100 per tree, which is how FEMA prices this. Somebody else besides me just said that. This is per tree, not cost per acre. We can figure out, let's say the right-of-way is 10 feet wide times 5,280 feet. That gives you the high end of square feet per mile. That's 1.2 acres per mile. Okay, if you do the same thing for 30 feet on private land times 5,280 turned into acres, there's a figure per acre that can be put on that. Okay, we know, I don't know if Chris is still here, but Rick is, that the prices people are paying for contractors, depending on whether they're highly mechanized or not and how much removal they do, is generally somewhere between $1,700 or $1,500 at the low end and maybe $3,500 at the high end. Okay, average is about $2,600 per acre. If you calculate the amount of acres on my little model, okay, which is at the high end of acres, I had 377 acres, between 87 acres for parks and 72 acres on the right-of-way, and I'll have to look at what's the 218 acres of private lands, based on what the RFPs had. Excuse me, that comes out to 377 acres. Okay, at a FEMA minimum bid of $100 per tree, you can put a price on how much that's going to be. If it's $200 per tree, you can put a price on that. If it's $300 per tree, you take the $13,300 and you multiply it by 100, 200, or 300. You take the nearly $400,000 management contract, you divide that by acres, and you can come out with a price per acre for managing that, and we also know the number of acres. So with all those pieces, we can put this together. So I'm looking at the whole paradigm of whether FEMA is the right way to go on this. Okay, there's huge amounts of rules and expenses. Maybe for Mountain View this is best because since they're a utility, things may be different. But for the county, I'll just read my last little paragraph here. If you had local contractors and if you could get the price down to $1,500 an acre to do all 72 acres of the right-of-way, okay, or all 215 acres of whatever, and you guys can tell me if I'm way out in the weeds here, maybe it's $2,000 an acre, okay? But the county right-of-way costs 72 acres would be $108,000 for 3,200 trees on those right-of-ways, if their tree estimate count is right, okay? If Park says 87 acres, it's $130,500 to take those trees out, just for the money, okay? And 218 in private acres is $327,000. That's a grand total of $565,500 for all the operations. So then you gotta have somebody to coordinate it, but does it need to be a $400,000 contract? Well, probably not. Dennis Heisey yesterday said, well, maybe we should hire a county forester to coordinate this. You know, somebody else tonight asked, well, why not just take the black trees out of the right-of-way? Okay, there's a lot of different ways to slice this. You know, if the county has $1 million that it's willing to be committed for to do the FEMA funding, if this winds up being a $4 million project, and I made that projection based on the management contract alone, the 10% of whatever the projection is, and we don't know what that is. But if it were, okay, then that puts the county on the hook for $1 million. Yesterday there was talk about, well, if we have to come up with $1 million in the short term, we could maybe do this through the XYZ funds, and I didn't quite get what those were. But let's say the county has $1 million that it can put toward hazard tree mitigation in Black Forest. You know, for $500,000, you could just cut the trees if you charge $1,500 an acre to the contractors, okay, if that's what the charge is. If it's 25% more than that, then it becomes $750,000. It's still not as much as the FEMA contracts, which come out at $200 a tree, comes out $8,000 an acre, and at $300 a tree comes out $11,000 an acre. The problem here is that FEMA uses urban standards. Arborists are used to cutting hazard trees that have buildings and cars and infrastructure and around. You know, and $200 for an arborist is cheap. Okay, they might be willing to do $800 or $1,500 a tree if it's a really bad one and it's really big.
Judy, I'll
But
give
it's
you
not
one.
appropriate
Judy, I'll
for
give you one
forests.
more minute.
Okay, that's fine. But it's not appropriate for forests, okay? Forests should be done on a per acre basis. Most of these trees are easy drops. You know, Mountain View's got a different situation because they're by the lawns. Kyle?
I think that was well said.
She's pretty right on as far as figures.
Yeah, I would be, I didn't come
And I
here
didn't
for a
talk
plug
to
for
him
my
yet.
company. Yeah, I didn't come here for a plug for my company, but, you know, I'm not at 1,500. I would say in the 2,000 is probably more normal, but it's good to hear that extrapolation. Thank you. My concern was where did the date come in? The January 26th, it seemed like it was a little bit of a case of the cart before the horse. You had a big push to get 13,300 trees. You know, I know a lot of very capable companies, and there's nobody that can do that in 1 month or two.
And we're fast.
Yeah. So I was a little concerned that maybe you guys were a little bit pressured to get all this stuff done really quick, and I don't know if that was FEMA pressuring you or what, but it definitely gives reason to question maybe we did rush this a little bit, and it needs to be, you know, looked into a little bit better.
And then Judy, is it Judy?
Mm-hmm.
Judy makes a great point, not only in that, but then the money stays in town. I mean,
All of it. These guys are going to go shop at your stores. They're going to eat at the Subway in Black Forest. They're eating at the sandwich shops.
Yeah.
Terry.
I think we really need to ask the question here, is FEMA worth it? I'm getting
that's why we're
feedback
having
from
this
my
meeting.
neighbors. I'm getting feedback from in here. They are so complicated, they are so stringent, their deadlines, their rules, their requirements are not in our best interest. And even if we get money out of them, it's our tax money that's probably gonna be borrowed from our future generations. That's another whole topic.
Yes, ma'am, and then I'll come back up here.
While we're talking on budget, this is supposed to be a long-range recovery meeting, and we're talking about 6 months. My question is, what is the plan for funding over the long range for trees, for instance, that may be healthy on the right-of-way now, but because of perhaps expected beetle infestation, things like that, are weakened and will need to be removed in subsequent years? Is there a plan for that?
That's a case-by-case basis. We haven't had to deal with this before because this is such a large amount of devastation. And so that would be a case-by-case basis, like the question earlier. Because of these criteria, the dangerous, we're not going to leave it there. We
But
don't
my
want that.
question was, is the county planning on funding for future need
Yeah.
as part of this recovery
Sure.
process past the July or June, whatever, 14th deadline?
I think some of it's a learning process for us as well on how this works. And so as this goes along, we'll see how much is actually clear or not clear, and then we'll make that determination then. I know we're not hands off. This is going to go on for a long time, so we're aware of it. And we're working. I don't know if you've noticed, but the crews are out there working your ditches and culverts right now because we're trying to get ready for spring in December because we don't want, we want the water to flow. So we're trying to get ahead of the folks and take care of it as best we can.
A forester on staff going forward for the next 5 years just seems to make a lot of sense.
We've got time for one more question, and we do have 2 quick agenda items, so don't everybody get up and run out after we change topics, but we will get out of here on time.
I raised this issue a number of times the first 3 months after the fire, and that was noise. And construction, demolition noise was detrimental to my family. People were out there before 7 o'clock, even though the rules were 7 o'clock. And I proposed to the county commissioners that we should have a temporary change to that to at least 8 o'clock. Now, nothing ever happened with that. So here we go. Someone complained about air quality with all the black that's going to be thrown up. I'm complaining about the noise that's going to happen. And I think we should still address that. I believe it's in the residents of Black Forest best interest that the situation is with me. I don't sleep well. I don't know about the rest of you. And my wife is disabled. And having people wake us up at even 8 o'clock is a problem. However, it's certainly better than 7 or before 7 o'clock. Now we're talking about coming in with crews and chainsaws, potentially other kinds of equipment. And I think noise needs to be addressed in the hour at which they can start. And I think the air pollution factor needs to be addressed because people are still living here. I'm not in the forest right now. I'm out in Falcon, so that's not directly impacting me now. It was until October, where I was still staying in temporary places in Black Forest. But I know there's still a lot of people living in Black Forest in and about the burned areas, and that I think this is an important factor, noise and the black dust. I mean, I was in over many months helping people cut a lot of black trees. I was black head to toe. I know how this is. And so having large-scale amounts of this happening is certainly not a good thing for mental health as well as physical health.
So I've got the insurance, the noise, the air quality, and your question as far as case law. Those are the things we need to address. Commissioner, if I can just ask a question of is Black Forest together, Kathy, you're here, is Prosperous Philosophy here as well?
They're not.
They're not, okay. I've received several phone calls from residents saying, I've got 5 acres, I don't have the money, I need to remove the trees, can you help me? Is that something I can refer them to you? Or is that, because I know, I've talked to NRCS and I don't, there's really nothing out there, there's nothing I can do.
Right now, we're looking at a lot of things. We've got a team dedicated to forest recovery. Dr. Von Oswald's been working with that group. Rick here, Chris Bailey, got some good heads working on that problem right now. We're trying to find alternatives. We're trying to find sources and solutions. Right now, the winter is when we're furiously researching this very thing. So I guess short answer is that if you want to connect them to us, absolutely. We don't have solutions available right now.
Okay.
We're seeking them.
If there's something that we can do as a partnership, government-private partnership, let's get together and talk about that, because I know there's folks that are desperate out there that need that help, and I'd like to be able to give it to them.
Yes.
Since we were talking with Black Forest Together, let's go right into we had an issue that came up prior to the last meeting. There was a media inquiry with regard to Black Forest Together, whether or not, their donations or whatever, if there was a way that the citizens could actually have some visibility into that. I actually deferred that issue to this vote to allow them an opportunity to address that briefly. So.
Yeah, thanks, Commissioner. I'm Dave Garrison. I'm here on behalf of Black Forest Together, and it's getting long. I think everybody's here on a different topic. Let me just say, if anybody's got any questions about finances of Black Forest Together, talk to me about it. I'll make sure that you get answers. The books are open, and I will handle any and all questions after the meeting. Thanks very much.
Okay. And just going over our timeline, again, we will be, the purpose of this meeting was we're still trying to gather information. I'm learning more at each different forum, and we're going to have a discussion again. This is going to be an agenda item on the 31st. I encourage people to come out, or at least send a representative, send emails to all of our colleagues. One of my colleagues is in the back right there. But I just want to make sure you put that on your calendar. In January 9th, United Policyholders will have another workshop. So put that down. And then our next long-range recovery meeting will go back to the last Wednesday of the month. So that'll be January 29th. Our January meeting is going to be specifically devoted to lessons learned. I really want to spend the time to get some feedback from you. I'm going to invite all of our staff members here to really listen. But we want to find out, because we'll be after, the holiday would have already gone by. We want to find out how we're doing from a recovery standpoint in all the different areas, whether it's regional building, whether it's working with our community partners. It'll be your opportunity to give us feedback, because we are trying to put together some lessons learned so that we can not only be prepared in the event that this happens again, but we are really national experts when it comes to this. So the only thing I wanted to also mention, where's Terry? Terry has a really neat thing that he wants to share with us in the back.
My name is Terry Stokes. I'm part of the Black Forest History Committee, and our committee has just finished producing a documentary on the Black Forest Fire. And I think you find it very informative. The DVD has about 250 pictures, and my assistant here will be glad to help you in any way that you can. The DVD also includes 3 maps that show the burn area. You can come and take a look. The DVD and the maps are $15, and if you prefer to read or want a little bit expanded version, there's a booklet that's $3. And the proceeds go to the community club and also helping things like Black Forest Together. So take a look at it. I think it's something that's worth preserving.
Great.
Thank you.
And again, I want to thank everybody for coming out. Look, I know there's a lot of emotions about this, and I've got to sometimes be a little bit of a jerk, I admit that. But I want to make sure people have an opportunity to voice their concerns. I think that we've demonstrated throughout this entire recovery process from the county that we are willing to listen and work with you. So we want to continue this dialogue, and then on the 31st, we will come up with something that's in the best interest of this community. So if you want to stick around and have some more questions, that's fine, but the formal part of the agenda is adjourned. So thank you very much.